After Marcus forced me out of his house, I managed to land a job as a cook at a small diner downtown. Every day, walking out of work, I would see the same elderly woman sitting on the corner, begging. She was older than me, her face etched with deep lines from years under the sun, her hands trembling with age or cold. I could never tell which. Something in her eyes reminded me of my own mother. I started pausing in front of her. I would drop a few coins into her rusted tin can, sometimes hand her a leftover roll I had saved from the kitchen. We never exchanged many words, just a nod, a tired smile, and then I would continue on my way toward the rooming house where I now lived alone. I was 69 years old when my son informed me there was no longer a place for me in his home. He did not raise his voice. There was no dramatic scene. He simply looked at me from across the kitchen table and stated that it was time for me to find my own space, that he had his life, his plans, and that I needed to understand. Understand what? I would not discover that until much later. I remember packing my belongings into an old duffel bag, clothes, a few documents, a photograph of Marcus when he was small. Nothing else. I did not possess much. I had spent my entire life caring for that house, that son, that family, a family that was now shutting the door on me with a cold courtesy that wounded me more deeply than any insult ever could. I refused to cry in front of him. I would not give him that satisfaction. I walked out with my head held high, even though something inside me shattered with each step. It felt like walking barefoot across broken glass while refusing to let anyone witness the pain. The rooming house where I found a room was small and dim. The walls bore damp stains, and the mattress creaked every time I shifted my weight, but it was what I could afford with what little retirement money remained. Marcus had not offered me a single dollar. He did not even help with the first month's rent. I spent the first several nights lying awake, staring at the water-stained ceiling, wondering when everything had gone so terribly wrong. I had been a good mother. I had given him everything. I had worked until my body could take no more. I had sacrificed my dreams, my desires, so he could have opportunities one never did. And now here I was, alone, old, invisible. But I could not afford to simply sit and wallow. I could not indulge in the luxury of sinking into sadness. I needed money. I needed to eat. So I went out searching for work. I knocked on many doors. At some establishments, they would not even let me finish speaking. "We don't hire people your age anymore," they would say with awkward, dismissive smiles. At others, they would look me up and down and shake their heads before I even had the chance to introduce myself. Until I reached Mr. Johnson's place. It was a modest local diner with wooden tables and checkered tablecloths. It smelled of fried onions and fresh coffee. Mr. Johnson was a man in his 50s with gray hair and large, calloused hands. He studied me in silence when I explained I was looking for employment. "Can you cook?" he asked. "I've cooked all my life," I replied. He nodded slowly. "Start tomorrow, 6 in the morning. Don't be late." There was no contract, no paperwork, just a handshake and the promise of a weekly paycheck. It was not much, but it was enough to cover my room and buy some food. That night, I slept a little better. I had a purpose. I had something to do. The work at the diner was grueling. I spent hours on my feet, peeling potatoes, chopping vegetables, stirring enormous pots of soup and stew. My hands became covered with small burns. My feet swelled painfully by the end of each shift. But I did not complain. I could not afford to. The other employees were young. They regarded me with curiosity at first, then with indifference. I did not talk much. I simply did my job and left. I was not seeking friends. I was not seeking pity. It was on one of those afternoons, leaving the diner, that I first noticed her. She was sitting on the corner near the bus stop. Her white hair was messy and unkempt, her clothes dirty and torn. In front of her sat a rusted tin can containing a few scattered coins. I walked past her the first time, not because I did not want to help, but because I barely had anything myself. But something made me turn back. Perhaps it was the look in her eyes. Perhaps it was the memory of my own mother, who had also grown old in silence, always waiting for someone to truly see her. The next day, I stopped in front of the woman. I pulled a few coins from my pocket and dropped them into her can. She looked up and met my gaze with tired, knowing eyes. She said nothing, just gave a slight nod of acknowledgement. That became my daily routine. Every day after work, I would pause in front of her. Sometimes I gave her money. Other times, I handed her a piece of bread I had saved from the diner. We never spoke, just that silent exchange of humanity between two people the world had forgotten. Weeks passed, then months. My life was reduced to a simple rhythm: work, walk, sleep. I had heard nothing from Marcus. I was not seeking him out. I did not want to know about him. But something began to trouble me. Lately, when I walked past the rooming house, I sensed someone watching me. Once, I noticed a shadow move behind a window. Another time, climbing the stairs, I heard quick footsteps retreating down the hallway. I dismissed it as imagination. I convinced myself that loneliness was playing tricks on my aging mind. Until one afternoon, as I bent down to hand the woman on the corner some change, she grabbed my wrist firmly. Her fingers were cold and bony, but her grip was surprisingly strong. She looked me straight in the eyes and spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "You've been good to me all these months. Let me return the favor. Don't go back to your rooming house today. Find a cheap motel. Stay there tonight. Tomorrow morning, I'll tell you something that will change your life." I froze. Her expression was serious, urgent. There was no madness in her eyes, only certainty. "Why?" I managed to ask. She shook her head. "Trust me, please." I slowly released her hand and walked away, thoroughly confused. What did she mean? Why should I avoid my rooming house? What did she know that I did not? I wandered aimlessly for a while, my heart pounding against my ribs. Part of me wanted to ignore her words. I thought perhaps she was senile, that she had confused things. But another part of me, the part that had sensed those strange stares, heard those footsteps in the darkness, told me to listen. I decided to take her advice. I found a cheap motel near downtown. I paid with what little I had saved and climbed the stairs to a tiny room with a hard bed and a window facing a narrow alley. I sat on the edge of the mattress and studied my hands. They were wrinkled, work-stained, exhausted. My whole life I had labored with these hands, cooking, cleaning, caring for others. And now here I was, in a strange motel, following the guidance of a woman who lived on the street. I did not sleep that night. I remained awake, staring at the cracked ceiling, waiting for morning to discover what she had to tell me. Dawn arrived slowly, filtering through the grimy motel window. I had not slept a single moment. Every noise in the hallway startled me. Every passing car outside made me consider the absurdity of my situation, hiding in a cheap motel following a stranger's warning while my room at the rooming house sat empty. I rose with an aching body, splashed cold water on my face, and departed without eating breakfast. I was not hungry. I carried only questions. The woman was still on her corner as always, as if she had not moved all night. But when she spotted me approaching, her eyes brightened with something resembling relief. "You did well not to go back," she said before I could speak. I knelt in front of her, not caring that people were walking past us and staring curiously. "What's going on? What do you know?" She glanced around, ensuring no one was listening. Then she leaned toward me and spoke in a low, urgent voice. "I saw a man prowling around your rooming house 2 days ago. Then yesterday afternoon, he was standing outside, staring up at your window, waiting for something." My heart skipped painfully. What man? Tall. Dark hair. Dressed nice, not like the folks around here.
He carried a black bag in his hand.
She paused, studying my face. He looked like you. Around the eyes.
The shape of the mouth.
I struggled to breathe. Marcus, are you certain? Though I already knew the answer. She nodded slowly. I live here on this corner. Nobody notices me, but I notice everything. That man wasn't coming to visit you. He was coming to do something,
and it wasn't anything good.
My hands began trembling. I wanted to insist she was mistaken, that Marcus would never do such a thing. But the words refused to emerge because, deep down, a part of me already knew. I had witnessed his coldness. I had experienced his indifference. And now this. Thank you, I managed to say. Thank you for warning me. She touched my arm gently. You fed me when no one else would.
It was the least I could do.
I walked away from her in a daze, my legs barely supporting me. I wandered aimlessly for some time, struggling to process what I had just learned.
Marcus had been at the rooming house.
Looking for me. Waiting for me. Why? I passed by the diner but could not bring myself to enter. I was in no condition to work. Mr. Johnson would see my face and know immediately that something was terribly wrong. I needed time to think. I needed to understand. I made my way to a nearby city park and collapsed onto a bench. Pigeons pecked at the ground near my feet. Children played in the distance, their laughter floating across the grass. Everything seemed so normal, so completely disconnected from the turmoil inside me. I thought about Marcus, about the child he had once been. I remembered when he was 5 years old and developed a dangerously high fever. I had spent 3 consecutive nights at his bedside, applying cold compresses to his forehead, praying desperately for his recovery. I remembered his first communion, his graduation ceremony, the day he announced his engagement. When had that sweet child transformed into this? I retrieved my old phone from my pocket. Several unread messages awaited me. One was from the rooming house landlady. I opened it with trembling fingers. Evelyn, I need to speak with you urgently. Call me. I dialed her number, my heart racing. She answered on the second ring. Evelyn, thank God.
Where are you?
Her voice sounded frantic. In a park.
What's wrong?
A heavy silence followed, then a deep sigh. There was an incident at the rooming house last night.
In your room.
My blood turned to ice. What kind of incident? There was a gas leak in your room. Specifically, in your room. If you had been there. She did not finish the sentence. The world seemed to stop spinning.
How did it happen?
I asked in a voice I barely recognized as my own. I don't know. A technician came this morning. He said the water heater valve had been opened. But I don't understand. You were always so careful with those things. I didn't open that valve, I said firmly. I haven't used the heater in weeks. Another prolonged silence. Then, quietly, someone else did. I ended the call. My hands would not stop shaking. Someone had entered my room, opened the gas valve, attempted to kill me. And that someone was Marcus. I returned to the corner where the woman waited. She regarded me sadly, as if she already comprehended what I had just discovered. I'm sorry, she said softly. I simply lowered myself to the ground beside her, not caring about the dirt or the curious glances of passers-by. My son tried to kill me. The words sounded impossible even as they left my lips. But they were true. As true as the sun beating down on our skin at that moment. I've witnessed it before, she said gently. Children who grow impatient with waiting, who want what their parents possess.
It's more common than you might imagine. But I don't have anything, I said bitterly.
Just a small property my husband left me. A plot of land worth only a few $1,000s. For that.
For so little.
She studied me with wise, knowing eyes. For some people, any amount is sufficient, especially if they carry debts, if they have vices, if they harbor needs they cannot control. I remembered the phone calls then, the ones Marcus would receive that made him visibly nervous, the hushed conversations in other rooms, the times I had asked to borrow something small and he refused, claiming he was short on money. I had always assumed it was normal, that everyone experiences difficult financial periods. But now everything made terrible sense. Marcus needed money desperately, and I was the only obstacle standing between him and that plot of land my husband had left me. What do I do now? I asked, not to her specifically, but to the air, the sky, anyone who might provide an answer. You go to the police, she said firmly. And you tell them everything. Because if you don't, he'll try again. And next time, you might not have a crazy old woman to warn you. She was right. I knew it with absolute certainty. But going to the police meant admitting that my own son wanted me dead. It meant speaking aloud what I could barely accept in my own mind. I spent the remainder of that day wandering through the city. I did not go to work. I did not call Mr. Johnson to explain my absence. I simply walked, trying to summon the courage to do what needed to be done. As evening approached, I returned to the cheap motel. I paid for another night with nearly the last of my savings. I locked myself in the small room and finally allowed myself to cry. I wept for the son I had lost, for the life I had carefully built that was now crumbling around me, for myself, and for the foolish belief that a mother's love would be enough to protect me from everything. When the tears finally ran dry, I washed my face and confronted my reflection in the bathroom mirror. My eyes were swollen. My skin appeared paler and older than before. But there was something new visible in my expression, something hard, something determined, that had not existed there before. I was not going to let Marcus win. I was not going to die in silence so he could profit from a piece of land he did not even truly need. If he wanted to destroy me, he would have to face me first. The following morning, I located the nearest police precinct. It was an aging building with peeling paint and flickering fluorescent lights. I entered with a firm step, though I trembled inside. A young officer greeted me at the front counter. "How can I help you, ma'am?" I drew a deep breath.
I'm here to report an attempted murder.
He looked up, clearly surprised. Can you provide more details? My son tried to kill me, I said, and for the first time since I had learned the truth, my voice did not waver when I spoke those words. They escorted me to a small interview room. An older officer with an immaculate uniform and a serious expression entered. He introduced himself as Sergeant O'Neill.
Tell me everything from the beginning, he said, opening a notebook.
And so I did. I told him about being forced from my home, about the job at the diner, about the woman on the corner and her warning, about the gas leak, about Marcus prowling around the rooming house. The sergeant took careful notes without interrupting. When I finished, he regarded me with an expression I could not quite interpret. "Do you have evidence to support any of this?" he asked. "Can the landlady confirm the gas incident? And the woman who warned you, does she have a name?
An address?"
I realized I did not even know her name. "She lives on the street, on the corner of Central Avenue." The sergeant closed his notebook. "Miss Hayes, I'm going to be honest with you. Without concrete evidence, this will be difficult to investigate. A gas leak could be ruled an accident, and the testimony of someone with no fixed address doesn't carry much legal weight." I felt myself sinking. "So you're not going to do anything?" "I didn't say that. I'm going to open an investigation. I'll interview the landlady. I'll check if there are any security cameras in the area. But I need you to be prepared. This will take time. I nodded, though inside I felt as if I were drowning. Time was precisely what I did not have. Marcus was still out there, somewhere in the city. And now he would know I was onto him. I departed the precinct with heavy legs. The sun beat down on the pavement and people rushed past me, each wrapped up in their own concerns. No one looked at me. No one knew I had just reported my own son for attempted murder. I could not return to the rooming house. That much was obvious. But I could not continue paying for motel rooms either. My money was disappearing rapidly. I needed to think. I needed a plan. I walked to the diner.
Mr. Johnson was in the kitchen as always, his apron stained, his brow furrowed as he checked a simmering pot.
When he noticed me enter, his expression softened slightly. "Evelyn, you didn't come in yesterday or the day before."
"I'm sorry," I said. I did not know what else to say. He wiped his hands on his apron and studied me carefully.
"Are you okay?" The simple question nearly broke me. No one had asked me that in so long that I had forgotten what it felt like for someone to genuinely care. I nodded, though we both recognized it as a lie. "I need to work," I said. "Please."
"I need the money."
Mr. Johnson sighed deeply. "All right, but if something happens, if you need help, you tell me." "Understood." I nodded again and put on my apron. The work helped keep my mind from spiraling. I peeled potatoes until my hands ached. I chopped onions until the tears streaming down my face could be attributed to the sting. I scrubbed dishes until the scalding water reddened my skin. At the end of my shift, Mr. Johnson paid me for the entire week, despite my absences. I did not question his generosity. I simply accepted the money and carefully tucked it into my pocket. When I left the diner, I searched for the woman on her corner. I desperately needed to speak with someone. I needed to unburden myself before I exploded. But she was not there that day. Her usual spot was empty. Only the overturned rusted can remained on the ground. A sudden fear gripped me. What if something had happened to her? What if Marcus had discovered she had warned me? I walked through the nearby streets searching for her, asking other homeless individuals if they had seen her. No one knew anything. No one recalled noticing her. I returned to the motel with a tight, anxious chest. I climbed to my room and sat on the bed, staring at my phone. I had 3 missed calls, all from a number I knew intimately. Marcus had not left any voicemails. Just the insistent, repeated calls, as if he knew I was deliberately avoiding him. I lay down without eating dinner. The hunger was a dull ache in my stomach, but I lacked the strength to venture out for food. I closed my eyes and attempted to sleep, but every sound startled me awake. Every footstep in the hallway made me hold my breath. Sometime in the early morning hours, I finally drifted into restless sleep. I dreamed of Marcus as a child. He had a fever and was calling out for me from his bed. I ran toward him, but the room kept stretching longer and longer. I could never reach him, and his voice grew increasingly desperate until it transformed into a scream. I woke up drenched in sweat. The clock read 5 in the morning. Outside, the sky remained dark. I rose and splashed water on my face. There was no point attempting more sleep. I went down to the reception area. The night clerk was dozing behind the counter. He did not notice me leave. The streets were nearly empty, only a few early workers trudging toward their jobs. I arrived at the corner where the woman always sat, hoping to find her there. But the spot remained vacant. I lowered myself to the ground in the very place where she usually rested and waited. I did not know what else to do. The sky began to brighten slowly, painting itself in soft shades of gray and orange. The city was awakening around me. That was when I saw her. She was walking slowly down the street, dragging her feet, carrying a plastic bag in her hand. When she spotted me sitting in her usual place, she stopped in surprise. "What are you doing here so early?" she asked. I rose quickly. "I thought something had happened to you. You weren't here yesterday." She smiled tiredly. "There's a shelter that opens on Thursdays. They serve hot meals. I went there." She held up the bag. "They gave me clean clothes." I felt immense relief wash over me. I went to the police. I told them everything. Her expression grew serious. "And what did they say?" "That they're going to investigate, but that they need evidence. That without solid proof, there's little they can do." She nodded slowly, unsurprised. "That's how it always works. The poor need evidence. The wealthy just need words." We fell into silence. I did not know if Marcus was wealthy, but he certainly possessed more than I did. He had connections. He had a house. He had a life I had helped construct, a life from which I was now completely excluded. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "I can't return to the rooming house. I can't keep paying for motels. And I have nowhere else to go." She studied me with those eyes that had witnessed too much hardship. "There's a women's shelter on 7th Street. It's not pleasant, but it's safe. You can stay there while you figure things out." The idea of entering a shelter churned my stomach. I had worked my entire life. I had owned a home, had a family, lived a normal existence. And now I was considering a shelter as if I were just another homeless person. But that was precisely what I had become. A woman without a home. A woman whose own son wanted her dead. "Thank you," I said. "I'll think about it." I went straight to the diner from there. Mr. Johnson was already preparing the day's ingredients. He saw me enter and said nothing, simply gestured toward the aprons. I worked all morning in silence, grateful for the distraction. During my midday break, I stepped out for fresh air. I sat in the alley behind the diner where empty vegetable crates were stacked. I pulled out my phone and stared at Marcus's missed calls. Part of me wanted to answer, wanted to confront him, wanted to demand an explanation, to ask him why, to understand how he had reached this terrible point. But another part of me understood that would only alert him. If he suspected I knew something, he might act faster. He might become more careful. The phone rang in my hand. It was him again. This time, before I could overthink it, I answered. "Mom." His voice sounded relieved. "You finally answered. I've been worried." The lie was so blatant it nearly made me laugh. "Worried?" "Yes, I've been calling you. Where are you? Why aren't you at the rooming house?" So he already knew. He had probably gone looking for me. The landlady must have told him I had not been sleeping there. "I'm staying with a friend," I lied smoothly. "I needed a change of scenery." There was a pause. "What friend? I thought you didn't know anyone around here." "I met people at work," I said, keeping my voice carefully steady. "Why all the sudden interest, Marcus? I thought you didn't want anything to do with me anymore." "That's not true, Mom. I just wanted you to have your own space. But you're still my mother. I worry about you." The words were correct, but the tone was hollow. It was like listening to an actor reading from a poorly written script. "I have to hang up," I said. "I'm working." "Wait. I need to discuss something with you. About your father's land. The deed papers. There are some documents I need you to sign. It's to renew the property taxes. Can you come home this weekend?" There it was. The real reason for his call. The papers. The land. The inheritance that was apparently worth more than my life. I can't this weekend, I said. I'm busy. It's important, Mom. If we don't renew the taxes, we could lose the property. Then lose it, I said before ending the call. My hands were trembling violently. My heart pounded so forcefully I could feel it throbbing in my temples. I had been more direct than I intended. Now he would know something was wrong. I returned inside.
Mr. Johnson glanced at me with concern but asked nothing.
I finished my shift operating on autopilot, my mind elsewhere entirely. When I departed that evening, I looked up the address the woman had given me. The shelter was housed in a gray, two-story building. A line of women waited outside, some with children, others alone like me. I took my place at the end of the line. A social worker holding a clipboard was recording names. When my turn came, she regarded me with professional weariness.
Name and age.
Evelyn Hayes, 69. She wrote without looking up. Situation: domestic violence. I hesitated. Did this qualify as domestic violence?
My son forced me out of his house.
She finally looked up.
Something in my expression must have told her there was more to the story.
You can come in. There's a bed available tonight. They provided me with a clean sheet and directed me to a large room filled with bunk beds. Other women occupied the space, some young, others my age, all wearing the same lost, bewildered expression, all trying to comprehend how they had ended up in this place. I stowed my few possessions beneath the bed assigned to me and sat on the thin mattress. This was my life now. A shelter. A borrowed bed. No place to call my own. But at least I was alive. And as long as I remained alive, I could fight. I spent 5 nights at the shelter. 5 nights listening to babies crying, to whispered conversations of women who could not sleep, to the creaking of bunks every time someone shifted position. The place smelled of cheap detergent and accumulated desperation. During the days, I worked at the diner. Mr. Johnson had noticed my exhaustion but did not pry. I was grateful for his tactful silence. I lacked the strength to explain how a 69-year-old woman had ended up sleeping in a homeless shelter. On the 6th day, when I arrived at work, Mr. Johnson was waiting for me at the back entrance. He wore a deep frown, his arms crossed over his chest. "I need to speak with you," he said. My heart lurched. He was going to fire me. I could not lose this job. It was the only stable thing I possessed.
"Come with me," he said, and led me to his small office at the rear of the diner.
It was a cramped room with an old desk and walls covered with tacked-up receipts. He sat down and gestured to the chair opposite him. "Sit down." I obeyed, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. "A woman came in yesterday asking about you," he said. "Young. Well-dressed. Said she was your daughter-in-law." My blood froze. "What did she want?" "She asked where you lived. Said your son was worried because you weren't answering your phone. That they wanted to make sure you were okay." "What did you tell her?" "That I didn't know. That you just come to work and leave." He looked me straight in the eyes.
"Evelyn, are you in some kind of trouble?"
The words caught in my throat. I wanted to say no, that everything was fine. But my face betrayed me. Mr. Johnson sighed heavily. "I don't know what's going on, and I'm not going to force you to explain. But that woman didn't look worried. She looked like she was hunting." He was right. Marcus was searching for me. And now he was using his wife to track me down. "Thank you for not telling her anything," I managed to say.
"Be careful," Mr. Johnson replied.
"And if you need anything, even if it's just someone to know where you are in case something happens, you tell me." "Understood." I nodded and departed his office, my legs trembling. I worked the remainder of the day in a state of constant vigilance, watching the door, expecting Marcus's wife to appear at any moment. That afternoon, when I left the diner, I went directly to the corner where the woman always sat. I needed to talk to someone. I needed to release some of this pressure before I collapsed. She was there, sitting in her usual spot, the tin can positioned before her. When she saw me approach, my face distraught, she made space for me beside her. "Tell me," she said simply. I told her everything. Marcus's call, his wife's visit to the diner, how trapped and helpless I felt, not knowing what to do. She listened in silence, nodding occasionally. When I finished, she sat thoughtfully for a long moment. "You know what surprises me most about all this?" she finally said. "That he thinks you're stupid. He believes you won't notice anything, that you can be easily manipulated." She was right. Marcus had always treated me that way, as if I were naive, as if I did not understand how the world truly worked. "Use that to your advantage," she continued. "Let him believe he's in control. Meanwhile, you prepare your defense." "What defense?" I asked desperately. "I have nothing, not even evidence of what he did." She studied me with that wisdom that only comes from surviving on the streets. "The evidence exists. You just have to know where to look. Your landlady can testify about the gas incident. The technician who inspected the installation filed a report, and I saw your son that night. The officer said your testimony doesn't carry much weight because you don't have a fixed address," I said bitterly. "Then we have to give me one," she replied with a sad smile. "Or find something else that makes me credible." I did not understand what she meant until 2 days later. It was Friday morning. I arrived at the diner early as always, but when I entered through the back door, I discovered Mr. Johnson speaking with a man in uniform. It was not a regular police officer. It was Sergeant O'Neill. My first instinct was to flee, but Mr. Johnson spotted me and motioned for me to approach. "Ms. Hayes," the sergeant said, "I need to speak with you." Panic tightened my chest. Did something happen? Yes and no. "Can we talk privately?" Mr. Johnson lent us his office. The sergeant closed the door and produced a manila folder. "I've been investigating your case," he said, "and I've uncovered some interesting information." He opened the folder and showed me several papers. They were bank statements. It took me a moment to realize they were Marcus's. "How did you obtain these?" I asked. "I have my methods," he said vaguely. "Look here. Your son has accumulated considerable debts. Unpaid loans. Credit cards maxed out. And 3 months ago, he took out a loan using the land your husband left you as collateral." I could not breathe. "He can do that? The land is in my name." "Not if he forged your signature. And that's precisely what I believe occurred." He showed me another document. "This is the deed he presented to the bank. Is this your signature?" I studied the document carefully. The signature resembled mine, but it was not exact. The strokes were different, firmer, more confident. "No," I said firmly. "That is not my signature." The sergeant nodded, appearing satisfied. "That's what I suspected. This changes everything. We're no longer discussing merely attempted murder. We're now dealing with fraud, document forgery, and potentially more." "What does that mean?" "It means we have solid grounds to arrest him. Attempted murder is difficult to prove without credible witnesses, but bank fraud is much clearer. Banks don't take these matters lightly." For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of hope ignite within me. "You're going to arrest him?" "I need you to come to the precinct and provide a formal statement about the forgery. I also need you to bring any documents you have regarding the land, original deeds, papers, anything that proves you are the sole owner." "They're at the rooming house," I said. "In a box under my bed." Can I retrieve them? The idea of returning to the rooming house terrified me. But I needed those papers. They were the only proof that the land belonged to me.
I'll accompany you, the sergeant said, as if reading my thoughts.
You won't be alone. We went that same afternoon. The sergeant drove an unmarked patrol car. I sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. When we arrived at the rooming house, the landlady was at the front desk.
She looked surprised to see me accompanied by a police officer.
Evelyn, what's going on? I need to retrieve some things.